You know how some TV shows just stick with you? That 70s show was one of those. A goofy, nostalgic trip back to bell-bottoms, arcade games, and awkward teenage moments. But behind the laughs and cheesy catchphrases, something darker was brewing. This isn't your typical Hollywood story of fame and fortune. Nope, it's about friendship tested, secrets kept, and how staying silent can cost way more than just your reputation. Buckle up. Well, not really, but get ready. Because this is the story Ashton Kutcher never wanted you to hear. The Hollywood Illusion. Hollywood. The land of dreams, red carpets, and apparently some seriously questionable decision-making. Let's talk about Ashton Kutcher, the guy who went from modeling to That 70s Show to tech investments. But behind that charming smile and those savvy business moves lies a story that's more tangled than a season of True Detective. Back in the late 90s, Ashton was the fresh-faced Kelso, and Danny Masterson was the cool, older Hyde. Off-screen, their bromance was real. Ashton once said, "I met Danny Masterson when I was 20 years old in 1998. He instantly became a friend, dedicated co-worker, and role model to me." Fast forward to the 2010s, and Ashton wasn't just acting. He was investing in startups, marrying Mila Kunis, and co-founding Thorn, an organization aimed at combating child exploitation. Talk about a glow-up. But then, the plot thickened. In 2017, allegations against Masterson surfaced, accusing him of hurting multiple women in the early 2000s. The news sent shockwaves through Hollywood, but Ashton and Mila stood by their friend. They wrote letters to the judge, vouching for Danny's character. Ashton described him as an extraordinarily honest and intentional human being. Now, let's pause for a moment. Imagine your friend is accused of something heinous. Do you support them publicly, or do you wait for the legal process to unfold? It's a moral conundrum that many of us hope never to face. Ashton's letter continued, "I attribute not falling into the typical Hollywood life of drugs directly to Danny." Mila echoed similar sentiments, calling Danny an amazing friend, confidant, and above all, an outstanding older brother figure. But the court wasn't swayed. In 2023, Masterson was convicted on 2 counts of rape and sentenced to 30 years to life in prison. The backlash was swift and unforgiving. Fans and critics alike questioned Ashton and Mila's judgment. How could they support someone convicted of such crimes? In response, the couple released a video apology. Ashton said, "We are aware of the pain that has been caused by the character letters that we wrote on behalf of Danny Masterson." Mila added, "We support victims. We have done this historically through our work and will continue to do so in the future." Despite the apology, the damage was done. Ashton stepped down from his role as chairman of Thorn, and both he and Mila faced significant public scrutiny. It's a stark reminder that in the age of social media, public opinion can be swift and unforgiving. So what's the takeaway here? Maybe it's that even our idols are fallible. Or perhaps it's that standing by a friend shouldn't come at the expense of justice and empathy for victims. Either way, the Hollywood illusion has cracked, revealing the complex, often messy reality beneath the surface. Damage control mode. So after the internet collectively raised its eyebrows at Ashton and Mila's character letters, you'd think they'd lay low, maybe take a quiet break in Big Sur. Nope. What followed was a PR scramble that felt less like damage control and more like tossing a wet napkin at a 5-alarm fire. Let's be clear, Ashton and Mila didn't just write letters. They wrote glowing reviews of a man just convicted of 2 counts of rape. Ashton claimed Danny kept him away from drugs and was someone he'd seen as a role model. Mila called him a protective figure who made her feel safe. But that warm, fuzzy image didn't land so well after the sentencing. In response, they released a joint apology video that looked awkward at best. It was shot against a blank wall, almost like a hostage video, and the tone was stiff. Ashton said, "We are aware of the pain that has been caused by the character letters." Mila chimed in with, "We support victims." But here's where things turned from awkward to yikes. People started digging into Ashton's past, like seriously digging. Old interviews, throwaway comments, early 2000s red carpet footage. Nothing was safe. And guess what resurfaced? That old story about how Ashton had a date with Ashley Ellerin the night she was brutally murdered in 2001. At the time, he was 23, and he showed up at her house to pick her up for a party. She didn't answer. Ashton looked through the window, saw what he thought was spilled wine on the carpet, and left. Turns out, Ashley had been murdered by the Hollywood Ripper. Ashton later testified in court. That case wasn't his fault, obviously, but suddenly, the public was seeing Ashton as more than just the punked prankster. He wasn't untouchable anymore. The halo had slipped, and maybe cracked. On September 15th, 2023, Ashton Kutcher stepped down as board chairman of Thorn. In his resignation letter, he wrote, "After my wife and I spent several days of listening, personal reflection, learning, and conversations with survivors, I have determined the responsible thing for me to do is resign." Now you know it's serious when someone walks away from a cause they've poured years into. Ashton didn't just quit Thorn, he tried to retreat from public life entirely. The couple basically vanished from Instagram, and their reps stopped issuing statements. It was radio silence. Fans started debating whether they were sorry for what they did or getting caught. And when the debate about apologies turns into a meme war, you've officially hit pop culture rock bottom. So yeah, part 2 of the Kutcher-Masterson fallout isn't just about a bad decision. It's about what happens when that decision detonates across your entire public life. Old clips, new headaches. So Ashton Kutcher's apology didn't land, his non-profit gig was over, and the internet was in full forensic mode. If there was anything from his past that hadn't aged well, it was getting dug up and dissected like it owed the world an explanation. And then, right on cue, came the clips. Old ones. Really old ones. Interviews from the early 2000s, back when low-rise jeans were everywhere, and Ashton was still the lovable doofus from that 70s show. But in one particular 2003 episode of Punk'd, things got weird. Ashton tells the audience that Hilary Duff is one of the girls that we're all waiting for to turn 18. She was 15 at the time, and it wasn't some off-the-cuff flub. He said it like it was a punchline. Even in 2003, that was a strange thing to broadcast on national television. And then people remembered, this wasn't an isolated thing. A 2003 clip of Ashton introducing the TRL audience to then 17-year-old Megan Fox also re-emerged. He casually mentioned she was hottest, but too young. At the time, she had just filmed a small role on 2.5 Men, a Chuck Lorre production Ashton would later star in. Fox would later tell Jimmy Kimmel in 2009 that on the Bad Boys the Second set, she was made to dance under a waterfall in a bikini at just 15. Kimmel laughed, the audience laughed. The 2000s were wild. But by 2023 standards, all of this felt different. People weren't laughing anymore. They were watching these clips with a new lens, and what they saw wasn't the fun guy from Iowa who married Jackie from TV. It was someone who'd spent years operating with a level of impunity that no one really questioned until now. And here's where it gets even murkier. Back in the early days of that 70s show, Ashton was 19. Mila was 14 when she was cast. Yes, 14. The infamous scene where Jackie and Kelso kiss, that was her first kiss ever. And it happened on camera, with a grown man. In a 2001 interview with People, Mila said, "I was like, oh, he's so cute, it's the Calvin Klein model. Then I was like, I have to kiss him?" Ashton later joked, "It was really awkward. She was like 14. It was my job." Not anymore. And the internet's not quick to forget. Suddenly people were side-eyeing everything he ever did. That time he spoke at the Teen Choice Awards about being really smart, was getting mashed into montages about poor judgment. Even his Senate testimony on child exploitation got framed as ironic. So while Ashton might have started the year thinking his biggest controversy would be a bad movie review, by the fall of 2023, his entire public image was on trial. Not in a courtroom, but across millions of phone screens. Mila Kunis. While Ashton Kutcher was busy becoming Exhibit A in his own undoing, Mila Kunis wasn't exactly sipping tea on the sidelines. Nope. She was standing right next to him, arms crossed, wearing that awkward apology video sweater, and nodding along like she just realized the floor was lava. But here's the thing. Mila didn't just co-sign Ashton's letter defending Danny Masterson. She wrote her own. In it, she praised Masterson for being a remarkable friend and someone who dedicated himself to leading a drug-free lifestyle. That last part sent the internet into a spiral. Because, the guy had just been convicted of hurting women. Her name on that letter made it clear. This wasn't just an Ashton problem. Mila was in it too. And people were shocked, because for years Mila Kunis had built this image of being funny, blunt, and kind of no-nonsense. She roasted Ashton in interviews, dodged drama, and pretty much stayed out of Hollywood messes. But now it looked like she had helped write the script for one. The backlash hit fast. Fans pulled up old interviews that, in hindsight, felt like red flags. In one resurfaced Armchair Expert podcast from 2018, Mila and Ashton casually laughed about how Mila's first kiss ever, at 14, was with Ashton during that 70s show. Dax Shepard cracked jokes about it, and Mila shrugged it off like, hey, it was scripted. But suddenly, people weren't laughing. They were asking why a minor had been put in that situation to begin with, and why Mila, years later, didn't seem fazed. But there was something even messier. Mila had history with Danny Masterson's wife, Bijou Phillips. They'd been friends. Mila had known Danny since she was 14. They weren't just co-workers. This was more like extended family. So when Masterson was convicted, it didn't feel like she was defending a stranger from set. She was defending someone deeply tied to her real life. And yet, that loyalty came at a price. One of the most vocal critics of Ashton and Mila was again Chrissy Carnell Bixler, Masterson's ex-girlfriend and one of the women he was convicted of assaulting. She didn't hold back. In a now-deleted post, she tagged Mila and wrote, "Dear Mila, I found your letter. My daughter watched you. She watched you write a character letter to the man who raped her mother. Do you remember me? Do you remember when I called your house crying?" It was gut-wrenching, and it hit harder than any public tweet or tabloid headline ever could. And then came the fallout Mila probably didn't expect. Moms, survivors, and longtime fans turning on her. She'd been the relatable girl next door, the one who joked about vodka and sweatpants. Now she was being dragged for siding with a convicted rapist, and not just in private, but in a letter meant for a judge. And just like that, Mila Kunis was no longer above the drama. She was in it, knee-deep, with fans asking whether she ever really stood for women, or just stood by Ashton. From fan favorites to public pariahs. So Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis dropped their half-hearted apology, went silent, and hoped the storm would blow over. But this wasn't a summer squall. It was a full-on PR hurricane. And their image didn't just get wet, it got washed away. Let's not forget, these two were Hollywood's golden couple. People rooted for them because their love story felt like a rom-com that came to life. Childhood co-stars who reunited, fell in love, got married, had adorable kids, and mostly avoided tabloid scandals. It was a rare, drama-free fairy tale, until it wasn't. Suddenly, everything from their interviews to their sitcoms got a second look. Social media started asking, were they always like this? Clips resurfaced of Ashton making creepy comments about Hilary Duff and the Olsen twins back in the early 2000s. He once told MTV, "Hilary Duff is one of the girls that we're all waiting for to turn 18, along with the Olsen twins." Yikes. That quote alone was enough to turn stomachs. Brands noticed the shift too. Ashton's startup connections got quieter. He had built a reputation as a tech-savvy investor with ties to Airbnb and Spotify, but now his name was coming with baggage. His work with Thorn, the nonprofit he co-founded to combat child exploitation, came under fire. As one fan wrote, "You can't fight trafficking with one hand and defend your bro with the other." The backlash wasn't just loud, it was sharp. Eventually, Ashton stepped down as chairman of Thorn. In his resignation letter, he wrote, "After my wife and I spent several days of listening, personal reflection, learning, and conversations with survivors and the employees and leadership at Thorn, I have determined the responsible thing for me to do is resign." Translation? He knew it wasn't going away. And here's the kicker. Their Hollywood allies stayed quiet. Not one A-lister came rushing to their defense. No statements, no subtle Instagram likes, Just crickets. That silence? Loud. Even that 70s show alumni who weren't involved started keeping their distance. Topher Grace, who had already kept a low profile and wasn't super close to the group, started trending for all the right reasons. Fans praised him for not writing a letter, for avoiding the party scene, and for generally minding his business. The internet basically knighted him as the only normal one. Hollywood has a short memory, sometimes. But when you defend someone convicted of sexual assault and then get caught pretending you didn't really mean it, yeah, that one's gonna stick. The dark side of that 70s show. By the time Danny Masterson was sentenced, that 70s show stopped feeling like a fun retro sitcom and started looking like a red flag factory in bell bottoms. What was once a lighthearted, nostalgia-fueled ensemble comedy became the subject of online deep dives and awkward rewatches. The internet started pointing out scenes and cast interactions that, in hindsight, felt off. Let's start with the crew. On-screen chemistry aside, the real-life dynamics behind the scenes were way messier than most fans knew. Masterson had a tight hold on the cast socially, especially the guys. He was close with Ashton Kutcher and Wilmer Valderrama, and the three of them were known to party together during filming. Mila Kunis was just 14 when the show started. Ashton was 19. Masterson? Irpati. Irandavde. In a now infamous Rosie O'Donnell show clip from the early 2000s, Ashton bragged about French kissing Mila on screen, calling it the first kiss she ever had. Rosie asked, "Is that legal?" And the audience nervously laughed. Mila, smiling awkwardly, said, "It's TV." Creepy? Absolutely. But no one batted an eye back then. In fact, behind the scenes, Masterson reportedly egged Ashton on before that kiss. Mila later told People, Danny goes to him and goes, "Dude, I'll give you $10 if you French kiss her." Ashton added, "And so he goes, yo dude, you're going to French kiss her? You gotta make it good." Then there's Wilmer Valderrama, who, while not involved in the Masterson case, had his own eyebrow-raising history. He dated Mandy Moore when she was a teenager, and later told Howard Stern she'd lost her virginity to him, a claim Moore denied. He also dated Lindsay Lohan and Demi Lovato when they were fresh out of their teens. In 2006, he famously bragged that he'd taken her Mandy's virginity and said she was wild in bed. Real classy. The cast seemed like a tight-knit family, but that closeness may have kept people quiet. Masterson was known for his connections to Scientology, which added another layer of fear and control. Several of his accusers were former Scientologists who said the church discouraged them from reporting what happened. The show's reputation tanked fast. Even Netflix's reboot, that 90s show, got caught in the fallout. While the original stars made cameos, no one could watch without thinking of what was happening off-screen. So while fans once thought of that 70s show as a comfort series, it's now a cautionary tale. It's about how we missed signs, excused behavior, and laughed off red flags just because the cast was charming and the jokes were good. But the truth? Behind all that nostalgia, something toxic was brewing. And now, nobody can ignore it. What now for that 70s show cast? So, the curtains dropped on the Danny Masterson saga, but the fallout from that 70s show drama is still playing out like a slow-burning soap opera. What's left for the cast, the fans, and the legacy of a show that once defined a generation? First off, let's talk public image. Danny's conviction left a massive stain on the show's reputation, and nobody's really been able to wash it off. The streaming platforms quietly pulled the series from some international markets, and while it's still available in the US, the conversations online are saturated with reminders of the dark side behind those laughs. Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis, the show's beloved couple, have kept a low profile about the whole ordeal. They've focused on family life and their tech ventures, but steered clear of commenting on Danny's trial or the allegations. Ashton did release a statement during the height of the controversy, saying, "I fully support survivors of sexual assault and encourage anyone who has experienced such trauma to speak up and seek help." Pretty safe, but fans wanted more. Wilmer Valderrama? He's been mostly radio silent on the issue. No public apology, no statement of support, nothing. That silence has been deafening, especially considering the buzz around his past relationships and comments. Meanwhile, Topher Grace, who stayed under the radar during the mess, got a lot of respect for not being involved in the drama and for supporting survivors quietly behind the scenes. Netflix's That 90s Show reboot faced an awkward reception. Fans were torn between excitement to revisit the world and discomfort knowing the original cast's history. Now, the big question: can any of these actors redeem themselves? Redemption in Hollywood is tricky. We've seen stars come back from scandals, but with crimes like those Masterson was convicted of, it's less about comeback tours and more about accountability and growth. Danny Masterson is currently serving his sentence and reportedly maintaining his innocence. But for many, justice has already been served. For the others, redemption means reckoning with their silence or complicity. Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis have the platform to be advocates. And while they haven't been outspoken, their private support might count more than a social media post. Wilmer's silence, on the other hand, leaves a gap that fans and critics won't forget. As for the fans, many have shifted from nostalgia to advocacy. Online communities have popped up, discussing consent, abuse in Hollywood, and how to better protect young stars. It's a tough pill to swallow, loving a show and realizing some of the people behind it failed in serious ways. That's the complicated legacy of That 70s Show, a mix of iconic laughs, relatable characters, and a very real reminder that sometimes the biggest red flags are hidden behind the biggest smiles. To close, it's worth quoting Laura Prepon, who played Donna, the girl who could have been the voice of reason but kept quiet for years. In a 2021 Variety interview, she said, "It was a really difficult time for all of us, and we're still processing it. I want to believe people can change and learn, but there's no excuse for silence when people are hurting." In the end, this story isn't just about a TV show. It's about reckoning with truth, holding people accountable, and hoping the next generation of stars gets a safer, kinder spotlight. And that's the real legacy worth fighting for. So do you think Ashton can get out of his problems easily? Or is this another problem just like Diddy's? Share your thoughts in the comments down below. Thanks for tuning in. Catch you in the next one.